In 1984 in South Florida, a rapist and murderer was on the loose. The killer was a ruthless and terrifying predator, the newest member of an infamous group known as serial killers. He kills just for the sake of it. And though his acts at first seem random, his choice of victims is fiercely selective.
Mother's Day, May 13th, 1984. A quiet rural road outside Tampa, Florida. Two boys were spending the afternoon flying homemade parachutes made from plastic bags. The wind carried them high into the air, drifting across an empty roadside field. It was the kind of simple childhood moment that should have faded into memory. But the wind carried something else that afternoon, a strange smell. At first it was faint, then stronger. The boys followed it, stepping carefully through the brush toward the roadside ditch. And there, lying in the grass, they found something no child should ever see: the body of a woman. Within hours, police would arrive and realize something terrifying. This was not just a murder. It was the beginning of a nightmare that would grip Florida for months. In the mid-1980s, the Tampa Bay region of Florida was growing rapidly. Suburbs expanded into rural land, highways stretched into quiet farmland, and the nightlife of the city drew thousands every weekend.
But the unique thing about the body to me was the fact that her legs were spread about 5 foot, 5 foot 1 inches apart from heel to heel. A scene that I'll never forget and a scene that I've never seen before.
But hidden among the neon lights and busy streets was a darker reality. Along certain roads in Tampa, prostitution had become common. Women worked the streets late at night, meeting strangers who drove past slowly in cars. Most encounters ended without violence, but sometimes they didn't. When investigators arrived at the Mother's Day crime scene, they immediately sensed something disturbing. The victim was a young woman, nude and badly decomposed. Her wrists were tied behind her back, and a rope was looped around her neck with a long extension trailing across the ground. It looked less like a murder scene and more like a display. Detectives believed the body had been left there intentionally, almost as if the killer wanted it to be discovered. The victim was soon identified as 20-year-old Lana Long. She worked as an exotic dancer in Tampa and had last been seen several days earlier. The medical examiner confirmed investigators' worst fears. She had been raped and strangled, but the brutality of the crime suggested something even more troubling. The way the body was positioned, the bindings, the deliberate placement along a roadside, all of it hinted at a killer who wasn't acting in panic. This looked planned, and if it was planned, it could happen again.
I remember driving all the way to the crime scene and saying to myself, please don't let this victim be bound. In 1984, we very rarely had homicide victims bound. That's the first thing I asked the officer protecting the crime scene when I drove up. Is she bound? And he said, yes, sir, she is. So we've gone from very rarely having victims bound to 2 within 2 weeks.
For detectives, the challenge was immediate. There were few witnesses. The area where the body was found was isolated, and the killer had left behind almost nothing. Almost nothing. At the edge of the crime scene, investigators discovered tire tracks pressed into the dirt. Nearby, they collected small pieces of cloth tied in knots around the victim's wrists. And then, during laboratory analysis, a forensic specialist noticed something incredibly small. A single red fiber. It was barely visible, but it would become one of the most important clues in the entire case. Just 2 weeks later,
is that I can actually pick the cast up, I can light it from different angles and different directions, and hopefully if there are any cuts or nicks or rocks that are caught in the tire, I'll be able to see that in the cast.
The fear detectives had been trying to ignore became reality. Another body was discovered. This time it was Memorial Day weekend. A woman had been found in a rural area near a highway outside Tampa. Like the first victim, she was young.
At this point, though, we realized we're dealing with a serial killer that it looked like he was probably preying on prostitutes. So we went out into the areas of the known prostitute areas and then started contacting the girls and let them know what was going on, giving them our business cards that if they saw something strange to contact us, let us know. We're looking for information.
Like the first victim, she had been bound. And like the first victim, she had been raped and murdered. But this crime scene was even more violent. The woman had fought fiercely for her life. Her injuries showed signs of a brutal struggle. Investigators believed the killer had beaten her before strangling her. The victim was identified as 22-year-old Michelle Sims. Now detectives faced a terrifying possibility. 2 women, 2 similar murders, 2 rural dumping sites. This was no longer coincidence. Somewhere in Tampa, a predator was hunting women, and he wasn't finished. The investigation quickly expanded across multiple agencies. Forensic analysts compared the evidence from both crime scenes. The result was chilling. That same unusual red fiber found on the first victim appeared again on the second. It had a distinctive shape under microscopic examination, a trilobal nylon fiber, often used in carpeting. That meant the fiber had likely come from inside a car. Somewhere in the Tampa area, a vehicle with red carpet had carried both victims. Investigators also examined the tire tracks left at the scenes. They discovered something unusual. The tires were mismatched brands, heavily worn and mounted backwards, with the black sidewalls facing outward. It was a strange detail, but if detectives ever found the car, it could identify the killer almost instantly. Still, weeks passed without progress. And then another body appeared. By the summer of 1984, a third woman had been found dead, then a fourth. Each discovery deepened the dread spreading through the Tampa area. Most of the victims shared similar circumstances. They were young women who had been working the streets at night. They disappeared after entering a vehicle with a stranger. Days later, their bodies were discovered in remote areas outside the city. Investigators began mapping each crime scene location. Patterns slowly formed.
You know someone else is going to die because you haven't stopped the suspect. You have enough information to know that he's doing it, but not enough information to pick him out of the crowd if he were to bump into you walking down the mall.
The killer seemed to drive along certain highways, dumping victims in quiet rural locations where discovery might take days. But the most frustrating part of the investigation was that the killer seemed to vanish completely after each attack. No witnesses, no vehicle description, no clear suspect, just those tiny red fibers and the growing number of victims. Everything changed in early November. A 17-year-old girl named Lisa McVeigh was riding her bicycle home after finishing her late shift at a donut shop. It was around 2:30 in the morning. The streets were quiet. Suddenly, a man grabbed her and forced her into his car. He pointed a gun at her and warned her not to scream. For the next 24 hours, Lisa endured a terrifying ordeal. The man drove her to his apartment, where he bound her and repeatedly assaulted her. But unlike the killer's previous victims, Lisa made a critical decision. Instead of resisting violently, she focused on surviving and observing. She memorized everything she could. The layout of the apartment, the sounds of nearby traffic, the smell of the rooms, even the details of the car she had been forced into. Lisa was certain she would be killed. But then something unexpected happened. After nearly a full day of captivity, the man drove her back toward her neighborhood and released her. He thought she was too terrified to talk. He was wrong. When Lisa reported the crime to police, investigators immediately realized her story sounded disturbingly familiar. Her description of the man matched the physical profile they had developed for the unknown killer. But the most important detail came from the car. Lisa remembered the interior clearly. Red carpet. It was the exact same type of fiber investigators had been finding on the victims. For the first time in months, detectives had something they had never had before: a living witness. Lisa worked closely with investigators, helping create a detailed composite sketch of her attacker. She even returned to the area where she had been released and retraced the route the man had taken. Her memory was extraordinary, and slowly, the investigation began closing in on a suspect. Just days later, a patrol officer noticed a man who strongly resembled the composite sketch. The man was driving a car that matched the description given by Lisa. When detectives examined the vehicle, they immediately noticed something chilling. The carpet inside the car was red. Laboratory tests confirmed what investigators already suspected. The fibers inside the car were identical to those found on the victims. The driver was arrested. His name was Bobby Joe Long. For months, he had lived an ordinary life in the Tampa area. But investigators soon discovered the horrifying truth. Long confessed to abducting and murdering multiple women. Some of the victims had been missing for months. Others had never even been connected to the case. By the time the investigation was complete, authorities believed he had killed at least 10 women during his rampage across Florida in 1984. The case left a lasting scar on the Tampa community. For months, fear spread as bodies appeared along quiet roads and empty fields. The killer targeted vulnerable women he believed no one would protect, thinking their disappearances would go unnoticed. But the case was ultimately solved because one victim refused to give up. Lisa McVeigh's courage and sharp memory helped investigators identify and stop a predator who might have continued killing for years. Today, those roads seem ordinary, with cars passing daily, yet the story remains a chilling reminder that dangerous predators can hide in plain sight.